Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and what we have here today is a Perun X16, a little baby version in 300 Blackout with a 7.5-inch barrel. Now, the X16 is this rather interesting, very modular, and very simple rifle developed in Slovenia by a company called Tinck Arms. I first came across them in Slovenia at Lynx Brutality in 2022, had the chance to take one apart and do a full video on it, how it works. It has a really interesting sort of a hybrid gas system where it does have an AR-style gas tube that comes back to a short-stroke gas piston located at the front end of the receiver. So it's a neat system. If anything, it sort of bears a resemblance to the AEA Arms Hack 7 that is now a very rare rifle made in limited numbers back in the 80s. But anyway, I'm getting distracted. I thought the gun was intriguing enough that at Lynx Brutality this year, in 2023, I borrowed one of the guns from Tinck Arms to run through the match. And that was, I believe, an 11 or 12.5-inch barreled 5.56, basically a short 5.56 carbine. And it ran perfectly for me. Had absolutely no issues with it whatsoever, which in a way was kind of not great for content because I ran the whole match with a gun that didn't really give me anything to talk about because it just worked. You put the sight on the target, pulled the trigger, and it hit things. But there's a third iteration of the X16 that I thought would be interesting to take a look at, and that is, well, if it's so modular and changeable, let's really change it. Let's put a really short barrel on, change the caliber to 300, and see if it actually works in that sort of configuration. And that's what we have here. In addition, this is not fully Slovenian made. This is a Tinck Arms manufactured upper on an American made lower. This comes from a company called AEA Arms. They're Tinck Arms distributor here in the US. And because of the way this was designed to essentially use a slightly modified AR-15 lower, it's basically an AR lower with the buffer tube, the buffer tower cut off, they don't have to import the lowers, which means they don't have to import a firearm part, just the upper, which isn't a serialized component, and then AEA does these lowers themselves, throws them on the guns, and sells them here in the US. So it simplifies the import process, and it allows them to have a wide variety of different configurations, as well as selling just straight uppers for people who want to do their own lower. Anyway, as a small 300 Blackout carbine like this, there are some pros and cons. The pro is, well, it is modular. It is very handy. I like the layout. It's easy to take apart. All the advantages of the standard X16 system. The controls can kind of be whatever you want because they're all AR-15 controls. So this one came with very basic non-ambidextrous controls, but if you want to change that, it's just like changing them on an AR. The downside to me is it's a bit heavy. This comes in this configuration, and I'm leaving the suppressor on it because, to my mind, there's really no point in shooting 300 Blackout without a suppressor. That's the whole purpose of the cartridge, is to be suppressed. So in this configuration, in fact, with an empty 20-round magazine as well, it weighs in at about 7.25 pounds, which isn't particularly heavy, but it's also not nearly as light as some of the other guns out there, most notably the Honey Badger, which is basically the same sort of gun, but like 2 full pounds less, a substantially lighter gun. So let me go ahead and pull this apart. Let me show you what they did with the gas system, because they actually put on a cool adjustable gas system, adjustable gas regulator that makes a lot of sense for this sort of setup. There's the whole thing. It does get substantially more compact than this because the buttstock folds into the side, and of course I can just pop the suppressor off there. So that gives you a really pretty nice short-handed package. For basic field stripping, all you have to do is push the rear pin out, pivot this down, the stock slides right off the back, and then that is the bolt carrier gas piston assembly. And this, for general maintenance, doesn't need to be further stripped, so that's the whole thing done. That's all there is to it for basic cleaning. Now, if we want to get a little more detailed, we will go ahead and punch out the front pin here as well. This is really tight on this particular gun. There we go. That pulls off the lower. So the lowers that AEA uses are Kaiser US ones. They're a very inexpensive polymer lower. You can see it's one of the polymer lowers that has a metal insert in it to actually give some strength to the buffer tower. And they've just milled this thing clean off the back, which is all you need to do to have an AR lower fit onto a Perun X16 upper. So that's kind of cool. Standard AR fire control parts. Everything else on here is literally just an AR receiver. Now, there's a little bit of a disconnect in my mind between the expense and the quality of the upper and the expense and the quality of the lower. This is a very cheap lower. Is that actually a problem? I'm a little torn because, well, this is under even less stress than a regular AR receiver because it doesn't have the buffer tower on it. So far it's worked just fine. I suspect if they had a lot of problems, AEA would have swapped over to using an aluminum lower, but this is probably pretty easy for them to make, and if it works, then it works. At this point, we still have some disassembly we can do. This is well beyond general field stripping, but we can take this top cover assembly off of the receiver itself. And to do that, I am going to, well, I can leave that in. I'm going to take out these two screws, which just position the two parts together correctly, and I'm going to pull out these two screws. You'll notice here on this side we have a flat plug, and on this side we have a QD sling swivel. And when I take these two screws out, you'll see they're pretty long. They do a couple things all together. They hold this rear end cap on, which locks these two parts together, and they also screw through both of these little caps. So you can have, where'd that go? There it is. So you can put the QD socket on whichever side you like, or you can get two QD sockets and have them on both sides, or two flat caps and have neither, whatever you like on that. Just another little element of modularity. Next up, these two screws. You'll notice here, by the way, the upper is serialized. That's because it is made in Slovenia, where it is considered a registered part, and so it has to have a serial number on it. In order to do this properly, I'll take off the handguard first. So we'll loosen this set screw. There we go. I can pull just the handguard off. And then we have a pretty snug fit between these two components, but with the screws out, whoop, that slides right off. So this is going to hold my optic, hold my charging handle. And then down here we have the actual receiver, barrel nut, the gas block, sort of. Like this is where the gas piston interacts. So your gas block is up here. That's going to take gas off the barrel, run it through this tube to this chamber. That's where the gas piston sits. And so no matter how long the barrel is, you don't have any reciprocating mass forward of this point, which is one of the cool parts of the Perun system. For most configurations, this would just use a typical generic AR gas block. But what they decided to do for the 7.5-inch barreled 300 Blackout version is give it an adjustable gas system. And this specifically is the one by Riflespeed in the US. And what I like about it is it's got a very easily adjusted numbered dial here. So it goes from 1, which is the least gas, all the way up to 12, which is the most gas. And this allows you to, if you need it, to have two different settings for subsonic and supersonic ammo that are really easy to switch between. This is going to get hot when the gun gets hot, but if you shoot both types of ammo, all you have to do is remember, you know what, it was like settings 3 for supersonic and it's 4 for subsonic with a suppressor, or if you're going to shoot it without a suppressor, maybe supersonics without a suppressor, you've got a different gas setting for that. Anyway, I really like the addition of this system. I often don't, I tend to like guns that are just set and forget and will work, and I'm willing to accept something being a little overgassed to not have things that can be adjusted and go wrong, but a 300 Blackout with a suppressor is one of those places where maybe it could make some sense to have an easily user adjustable gas system. So there it is, completely taken down, and I think now it's time to take it out to the range and see how it actually shoots. All right, let's do some shooting. We're gonna try supersonic and subsonic today. By the way, I put 300 Blackout rubber bands on all of my 300 Blackout magazines just to ensure that I don't ever cross-load a 300 into a 5.56, because that's a bad thing.
So that's why that's on there. We're going to start off with Supersonic Bernal. This is the cheapest 300 Blackout one can find. We've got the little mini Rex can on there. See if it runs. That's not bad. I'm still going to wear Ear Pro with supersonic ammo, especially with a little can like this, but it definitely does cut the report nicely. And the recoil is not as bad as I expected. On some 300s, especially the particularly light ones, supersonic ammo actually recoils a lot harder than you might expect, because it is a relatively heavy bullet at a relatively high velocity on what is often a very light gun. So you get in a 5.56, and that's what you expect from 300 Blackout in terms of recoil, and it doesn't always work that way, but this is actually pretty comfortable. Box open. So the finest in Bernal Russian steel case. I'm not sure how much longer, well, I'm sure this is all sold out now, and we're probably not going to be getting much more of it in for a while. So actually occurs to me, maybe I should be holding on to this as rare collectible ammo. I'm getting some gas back in the face, but not as much as I kind of expected. It's not perfect, but it's not nearly as bad as some other rifles that I've used. All right, let's try subsonic, see how that runs. All right, our subsonic loading we're going to try is Winchester 200 grain subsonic. Now, this has a fancy adjustable gas port. I'm curious to see if it'll just run on the same gas setting as the subs, or the supers. The handguard's getting warm, like really warm. Not too hot to hold yet, but it's gonna be there soon. That is incredibly pleasant to shoot, which is what you would expect with subsonic. You're essentially cutting your velocity in half or more. You're cutting the kinetic energy, well, you're cutting the momentum in half. You're cutting the kinetic energy by a tremendous amount, which makes it really soft and easy to shoot. So I'm going to pull an earplug and see what this sounds like. Subsonic with a relatively small suppressor. That is just vaguely unpleasant without Ear Pro. So if you needed to, if this was a home defense thing, I'd have absolutely no qualms about running this without Ear Pro. But since I'm out on the range and I have no reason not to, I'm going to put it back in. A larger suppressor, you could absolutely run this perfectly hearing safe. No ambi controls here, but you could absolutely put on a receiver that does have them if you wanted to, because it's essentially just, well, it is a standard AR lower with the buffer tower cut off. Still toasty, but still holdable after 60 rounds. So that's, with a break to load magazines, that's not too bad. Might want to consider putting some sort of wrap on that, although it'd be a little bit hard to do because you do have the charging handle up here that you can't wrap over the top of. So vertical front grip might be a good option. Shooting subsonic 300 is just really fun. This would be a All right, I have to say I'm quite happily impressed. The gun ran flawlessly in both subsonic and supersonic on gas setting 4 here. No issues with mags. The suppressor works nicely. Trigger ran very nicely. That's a good trigger in there. But part of the idea of this is the modularity. You can put in whatever nice trigger you want. Handguard gets toasty. I'll probably be putting a vertical front grip on this to do future shooting with it, but that's about the only change I would make. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. A big thanks to AEA Arms for sending me this to do some filming with, and of course a big thanks to Tinck Arms for the introduction to this rifle in Slovenia. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.